Couple of years ago, when I was in college, I was in a horrible car accident where a drunk truck driver plowed into my car and I ended up in the hospital for several weeks. I fractured an arm and it took me a really long time to learn how to walk again. Even more time for all the scars to fade away, and in spite of the fact that it has been almost 3 years since the accident, I'm still extra careful while driving, even though the accident wasn't even my fault. The one thing that I do remember from that time was that my family had refused to show up to be there for me because my sister had gone into labor. Fun fact, I was actually about to surprise my sister by driving to the hospital where she was going to be giving birth when I ended up in that car accident. I was a couple of weeks away from graduation at the time and my college campus was just a few hours away from my hometown, so it was quite convenient for me to travel back and forth. When I got the phone call from my parents that my sister had gone into labor and they were rushing her to the hospital, I decided to surprise her and borrowed a friend's car so I could travel there. However, on the way, I had an accident and had to be rushed to the nearest hospital. It was mostly my friends who were there for me around that time, since my parents were too busy with my sister, and I totally understood. What I did not like was the fact that even a couple of days after my sister had given birth, my parents did not bother to show up to check on me. I called them several times after my accident, even though it was quite painful for me to do so and I was slipping in and out of consciousness quite frequently. But the only thing that I kept asking was if my parents had called or if they had shown up, and I was disappointed every time. Finally, about a week after my accident, my parents called me up. Even then, it was not to ask me if I was fine, it was just to ask why I had been calling so frequently because they had been ignoring one of my calls since they had been with my sister and her baby. I was shocked by how cold they were being with me, especially given the circumstances, but I still decided to ask them how my sister was and how the baby was doing, and they told me that my sister was fine and so was my niece. They did not ask me how I was, even though I was pretty sure that they had found out that I had been in an accident by then, since my friends had told me that they had texted my parents on every possible platform. When they did not ask me, I decided to offer them that information myself, and I told them that I had been in an accident and I had been trying to reach out to them for the past couple of days to tell them about it. At that point at least, I had hoped for a reaction, but they just told me that they knew that I had been in an accident, and my friends had reached out to them and told them about it. And that was it. They did not bother to say anything about it. I got really upset and ended up asking them if they couldn't even be bothered to pretend to care for me. That was when they told me that they had not answered my phone calls and texts on purpose because they didn't want to speak to me, since they believed that it was more of a priority for them to be there for my sister while she was giving birth than to be there for me, because of an accident that I had caused. I couldn't understand what they were talking about because, as far as I knew, I was not the one who had been drunk and it had been the truck driver's fault. But they told me that that's not what they were talking about. They said that I had caused the accident myself by deciding to drive all by myself, and that it was really irresponsible of me, since it had been quite late at night, and I had no reason to go out on a drive. When I told them that I was actually going to drive to the hospital so I could be there for my sister, they told me that it was still quite unnecessary of me to do something like that, and I had nobody to blame for the accident but myself. It was really horrible and insensitive of them to say something like that to me, and I got really upset, so I ended up hanging up on them without another word. Later on, I found out that when the people who had discovered me on the site of the accident had called 911, my parents had been contacted first, but they had refused to show up and had even requested not to be called about this again. And then the college authorities had been called because I had my ID on me at that point, and that's how my friends found out. So it was even more disappointing for me, because even though my parents had been called by emergency services and told that their daughter had been in an accident, they hadn't bothered to show up, and their only response to the whole situation had been to blame me for what happened, even though I was only trying to be there for my sister and the family. After that incident, I realized that, even though I had wanted to be there for my family had absolutely no interest in being there for me, because even my sister had not bothered to reach out to me after that. For the past 3 years, I have had no contact with my family because after that incident, I really gave up on them. Even before that, we had had a normal relationship, but I had always felt like I would always get sidelined by my sister and her priorities. And when I had my accident, it was proven to me by my family. Just to be clear, I was not upset that they had not abandoned my sister while she had gone into labor and not come to see me, but I was just upset that even after my sister had given birth, they did not think that it was important to come see me. I didn't even expect my sister to visit me in the hospital because obviously at the time, it was impossible for her, but it was not impossible for my parents. And my sister had her fiancé and her in-laws to take care of her. I only had my friends. But I was lucky that I had friends who were good enough to be there for me all along, and they helped me through my recovery. Even the funds for my recovery process and other expenses were all taken care of by them and their parents, and I'm still paying them back, but I'm really grateful with them for everything that they did for me, and I don't think I'll ever be able to pay them back truly. Anyway, even though it has been 3 years since the incident, they have not bothered to ever reach out to me, and many people in the family have questioned why we don't have a relationship anymore, but I have had the courtesy to keep it all to myself so far. I guess we had an unspoken agreement that we could not discuss this with anybody else from the family, and I had stuck to it so far, but they decided to talk about it recently, and one of my aunts reached out to me afterwards because they had been talking about the incident in a way that painted me to be the bad guy. This happened a couple of weeks ago, when my parents were hosting a family dinner at their house for a couple of people to celebrate my sister's promotion at work. While they were all together, the topic of my estrangement from them came up, and after a lot of back and forth, my parents finally decided to talk about it after 3 years because they did not think they needed to keep this a secret from the family anymore. But while narrating the story, they changed what happened in the aftermath of my accident. A few facts were true, like I had intended to surprise my sister by driving to the hospital, and on the way, I had gotten into a car accident. However, after that, they claimed that they had not been contacted, and they found out about the accident a couple of days after it took place, so a lot of time had already passed by then. And they were too preoccupied with my sister and the baby, so they did not really think about why I hadn't contacted them yet. They also said that when they had finally found out about the accident, the first thing that they'd done was call me up, but I had been really upset with them, so I had refused to speak to them, and that was simply not true. And after that, they had said that they had tried to contact me on several occasions, but I had always rejected their attempts because of that one incident, and eventually, even they had given up trying to get in touch with me. Basically, they painted that whole situation to be a misunderstanding, and made me look like the villain who had been completely unforgiving towards them for not caring. My aunt, being the good Samaritan that she is, decided to contact me, even though she had been specifically instructed by my parents not to speak to me about this because they did not want to make a big deal out of this. Even though I knew that the real reason they did not want anybody speaking to me about what they had told them was because they did not want me to find out that they had been lying about what really happened back then. Anyway, my aunt contacted me and told me that 3 years had passed since I had spoken to my parents, and they really missed me, and I was missing out on the opportunity of being an aunt to my niece, and she knew that she wouldn't miss out on an opportunity like that, so she would encourage me to reach back out to my parents now. I was very confused, so I called her up, and she told me that she knew the real reason why I had not been in touch with my family for so many years, and she told me what my parents had told them, and I was so shocked because they had painted me as the self-centered bad guy and made themselves the victim in the situation, even though it had been the other way around. I was furious when I heard what they had told everybody in the family about what had happened all those years ago, and I decided to speak to my aunt and tell her the truth. I also told her that I was willing to put her in touch with my friends who had covered all my expenses, in case she didn't want to believe me, but what I was telling her was the real version of what happened, and it was actually my parents who couldn't care less about me or my accident. They had been contacted, they just did not want to be bothered at the time, and I wasn't even mad at them because they had decided to be there for my sister because she was giving birth, and that was also quite significant. But even after that, when they did not bother to show up for me, that was when I got upset. After I had clarified this to my aunt, even she seemed pretty shocked and apologized to me for doubting me. But I was really thankful that she had decided to speak to me, because otherwise, I probably never would have found out what my parents were saying behind my back now. After my conversation with my aunt, I guess the news of what really happened all those years ago started to spread, because lots of people started reaching out to me, telling me that what I did by telling my aunt the truth was necessary, because otherwise, my parents might have gotten away with lying about what had happened and making me the bad guy in the situation. A lot of people in the family even started to sympathize with me, telling me that what had happened to me was really horrible and that my parents should never have treated me like that. It was unfair and undeserved. In a way, I'm really thankful to my aunt because she got people to hear her out and believe my side of the story, otherwise my parents would have gotten away with it. But it has become a bit troublesome for me right now, because after my parents found out that I had spoken to my aunt about my side and she had spoken to other people about it, the rest of the family started to distance themselves from them. And I really don't understand how any of this is my fault, because all I did was tell people the truth, that's it. In fact, it would be incorrect to even say that I told people the truth. I only told my aunt the truth, and she decided that she was going to tell everybody else. Anyway, they are blaming me for how the situation is turning out to be, because right now, nobody from the family wants to speak to them, and everyone has pretty much been ghosting them. Which is not a good thing, because in a couple of weeks, she is going to celebrate her daughter's 3rd birthday, and it's going to be the 3rd anniversary of my accident as well. But what they are concerned about right now is that since the family has found out the truth, they think that they are not going to be attending their birthday, and it's going to be pretty disappointing, because my niece is excited about her birthday party and the entire family had been invited, but nobody has responded to the invitations yet. Some people have already declined it, and haven't even bothered to offer an explanation, So that's what's going on right now. And even though my family has not spoken to me in 3 years, this has made them reach out to me and they have been continuously trying to text and call me. I haven't responded to any of their phone calls because I don't think it's important, but most of their messages are along the lines of accusing me of creating the situation on purpose to steal my sister's spotlight. Apparently, my parents, and even my sister believe that I'm doing this on purpose because I can't stand the fact that they chose to be with my sister while she was giving birth instead of being with me, and this is my way of getting revenge. They even went to the extent of saying that they were sure that I had gotten into the car late that night on purpose because I wanted to make myself the center of attention, especially because I was jealous of my sister since she was giving birth and getting most of attention from everybody in the family, which I wanted for myself. It's such a horrible, nasty thing to say. I can't even imagine thinking that way about somebody else, no matter how much I hate them. The implication that I had caused that accident on purpose because I wanted attention and sympathy from my family, it was just disgusting. On top of that, they were accusing me of seeking attention even right now, because they knew that I had found out that my sister had received a promotion at work and was doing well in her life. I couldn't stand it, so I had decided to go out of my way to bring up things from the past and paint them in a bad light. I don't even understand why they would say something like that when they know exactly what they had been trying to do. They were doing exactly what they were accusing me of, and the hypocrisy of it just made me so angry. I had still managed to ignore all of their messages and kept blocking their numbers ever since they started trying to contact me, but a couple of days back, my parents decided to actually show up at my door and told me that I needed to fix the situation that I had created because my niece was going to be celebrating her birthday in a couple of days and they could not let that be a disappointment to her. So I had to speak to my aunt and the rest of the family and tell them that whatever I had said was just lies to make my parents look bad. And when they showed up, demanding that I do this for them like they were entitled to my help after everything that they had done, that's when I really lost my temper and probably where I might have been the When they showed up and started yelling outside my house, I obviously refused to let them when I had told them that if they did not leave, I was going to call the cops. I told them that I had no interest in entertaining any of their BS requests, that whatever they were asking of me, it was way too much given what they had done for me, which was absolutely nothing. When the threat of cops did not scare them, I decided to open the door and I told them that they needed to clear out, and I even had my phone in my hand and had the number dialed. But my dad told me that he was not scared. He knew that I was just an attention seeker and that's why I had gone out of my way to ruin their reputation. And now, I was trying to get on my sister and her daughter in this petty way and he was not going to let this happen. So I had better use that phone to call my relatives up and tell them the truth about what happened, even though I really was telling them the truth. But they wanted me to tell them their version of the truth, where they were the saints and I was the villain. They wanted me to tell people that I had been lying and they just wouldn't stop yelling at me, so I went a little crazy and I just snapped and started shoving them off my property. At first, they were just shocked that I had decided to get physical, but then they started to retaliate. But by then, I was so angry that I was out of control and I just kept shoving them until they ended up on the street outside. And while they were on the streets, I still kept shoving them and I screamed at them and said that I hoped that some vehicle would come along and run over them and nobody would come to see them in the hospital, and maybe then, they would finally be able to feel what I had felt although years ago when they had abandoned me after my accident. They seemed really shocked by my outburst, and once I was done screaming at them, I decided to go back in and ignore them. Thankfully, they did not bother me after that, but my sister decided to call me later on and told me that what I had done was excessive and that I shouldn't even have opened the door and just called the cops if I was so upset with them showing up. But what I had done had apparently really traumatized my parents, and she thinks that I owe them an apology, and even I feel really bad for the way I had dealt with the situation so violently because that's really not me. So Ida for shoving my parents when they showed up at my house after 3 years of no contact? Edit. So here's the thing. I will tell you guys why it is a big deal for me to be shoving my parents. It's not just the fact that it was a violent and physical outburst, it's also the fact that I am a trained MMA fighter. I'm not professional by any means, but I'm still significantly stronger than both my parents, and for me to be getting physical with them, of course, it was traumatizing for them because it couldn't have been easy to handle it for them. Apparently, according to my sister, I even ended up bruising them, but that might have been a bit of an exaggeration on her part just to get me to feel sorry for them. Anyway, that's why it's a big deal, and I'm not really sure if I owe them an apology right now or not. My sister is pretty convinced that I do and has told me that she's going to press charges if I don't publicly acknowledge what I had done and tell everyone in the family that I had been lying about what I had said. It feels wrong for her to be threatening me like that, especially when she knows for a fact that what I said was all true. But I have also been standing my ground, and I have told her that if I do end up apologizing, it's going to be because I actually feel sorry and not because I'm scared of what she thinks is going to happen to me after she presses charges. Update 1. So it has been 2 days since I posted here, and after going through the comments and stuff, I have decided not to apologize to my parents. And I have also decided not to interact with my sister if she tries to get in touch with me again, because clearly she's just as bad as them. The only reason I had not been against her so far was because she had been nice to me when we were kids, but now, I'm pretty sure that she has changed. Thank you so much to everybody who commented on my post and let me know what they feel about the situation. It really means a lot to me. But at this point, I'm afraid that I don't think apologizing to my parents will set the right example. They are going to think that they can intimidate me into shutting up, but that's not going to happen anymore. They cannot just get away with everything and expect me to tolerate their behavior. They were the ones who showed up at my door and started to threaten me and refused to go away even when I told them that I was not interested in interacting with them. If my sister decides to press charges, I'm just gonna say that I was provoked, and I'm pretty sure that even the punishment for shoving my parents is not going to be very extreme, because it's not like they sustained severe injuries. And I was just trying to get them off my property, so I'm mentally prepared for everything. But the one thing that I'm not gonna be doing at any cost is apologizing to anybody, because I'm absolutely not sorry, and that's it. Update 2. So apparently, today was supposed to be the day that my sister had that huge birthday bash for her daughter, but unfortunately, nobody turned up. I know that for a fact because I spoke to my aunt and she told me that literally everybody in the family decided to skip the party after hearing what had happened to me all those years ago. It was not even the fact that they had refused to show up and be there for me 3 years back when I had my accident, but it was because even after 3 years had passed, they had decided to lie about what had really happened to make themselves look good and make me the bad guy. That was just not okay with anybody in the family, and I'm really glad that people decided to do the right thing. I got really emotional while speaking to my aunt because she told me that had anybody else known about my accident, they would have shown up to be there for me, but I had decided to keep everything private. In fact, I deactivated all my social media back, and even when anybody would try to reach out to me to talk to me, I would tell them that I was fine, but I never mentioned anything about the accident. So recently, a lot of people didn't even know that I had been in such a terrible accident 3 years ago. It was a very dark chapter of my life, not just physically, but because of what I've gone through emotionally, and I don't really want to relive it, but I can't ignore the past either. So while speaking to my aunt about what had happened all those years back, I ended up crying, and I finally got all the emotions off my chest because I had been suppressing it for almost 3 years now. She was very supportive of me and told me that the entire family thinks that I'm really strong for having gone through that all by myself, and told me that now, in the future, if anything ever happens, I know who to call. And I'm really grateful for the talk that I had with her, and also that she bothered to stand by me in the past couple of weeks. Anyway, now that nobody attended the party, I know that my sister and our parents are going to be majorly upset, so I'm just bracing myself for the reaction. To be honest, the only person that I feel bad for in this situation is my niece. I've never met her or had any interaction with her, but I know that having nobody show up on the day of your birthday cannot be easy. I'm sure that her parents will do something to make it up to her, and she's just 3 years old. It's not like she's going to remember this in a couple of years. Update 3. Hey, so it has been 1 week since I last posted an update, and a couple of things have happened since then. The first and most significant one being that my parents have reached out to me. I had blocked them everywhere, so, once again, they decided to create another email account just so they would be able to talk to me. They sent me an email saying that they do regret how they treated me 3 years back, but honestly, at the time, they were all just really stressed out because of my sister and her delivery, and they were too caught up with that to pay attention to what I was going through. But now, in hindsight, they do agree that they should have at least bothered to come visit me. It was talking that they were finally agreeing that they had made a mistake, but honestly, at this point, it doesn't make a difference anymore. What has been done has already happened. The damage is done, and they cannot really say these things and take it back. It might have been easier for me to deal with this had they sent this email to me couple of months after the accident, but they waited for 3 whole years and a whole lot of confrontation to acknowledge the fact that they had been wrong and careless. By now, I have obviously figured out that their priority is my sister and not me, and I'm fine with it. I've made my peace with everything, so their apology means nothing to me. The second thing that they mentioned in that email was that they had spoken to my sister, and they had collectively decided not to press charges against me for the other day. Good for them, I guess. It wouldn't have made a difference to me, even if they had chosen to do so. Anyway, after we sorted things out in that email, because I responded to them, saying that it was fine and that I did not want them to contact me anymore, they put out a statement on social media, saying that we had cleared the air and they would appreciate it if the rest of the family stayed out of this feud or whatever now because it was over. I guess they just really wanted people to stop judging them over the past, and that's why they put out that statement, or else they wouldn't even have acknowledged it. The rest of the family showed them that they were serious about not being on the same page with them and being okay with whatever they had done so far by skipping the birthday party, so they had decided to take it seriously as well. But they still had to be the victim, which is why they put up a statement in that tone. Anyway, I'm just really glad that this is over and I can go back to my normal life now.